Hello, and welcome to Waffle-Free Storytelling. It's Tina Konstant here, and all the waffle is at the end, which means we're jumping right into this week's story, which is called 1,000 Keys to Freedom. It's a story about Dimian. He had lived his whole youth being told that these were the best years of his life, that he had better enjoy them, and that life would never get any better than childhood, so he had better make the most of it. Well, as a kid, this worried him, because he hated school. He wasn't particularly happy at home. He didn't like doing what he was told to do, and when he did do what he was told, it felt like he was wasting his youth, certainly not making the most of it. So any time anyone said, "These are the best years of your life, you'd better enjoy it," he'd say, "How is it possible to have the best years of my life before I've even lived?" Dimian battled through childhood, always trying to find the best of everything. But other than his older brother, who for all of those years was the very center of his world, there just wasn't very much that was good to hold on to. So as you can imagine, when his brother fell from a tree and died when Dimian was just 16, leaving him alone in the world with a family who seemed to get more and more angry with every day that passed, Dimian thought he had better leave home and go and find the best years of his life before it was too late. Now, being a young teenager with limited resources and having lived in a small town in the middle of nowhere, the only place he could run to was the woods. Dimian knew the forest. He and his brother had explored every inch and mile, cave and river. He was sure he could hide there until he worked things out. But he was wrong. It took just 3 days before the wind and the rain and cold and hunger pushed him out of the cave he had found and in search of better shelter. Now, as I said, Dimian knew the forest. So when he came to a small clearing with a cabin that looked like it had been there forever, he was surprised. And he was curious, but above all, he was weary. The place looked cared for and lived in. The garden around the cabin was full of fruit trees and vegetable patches and shrubs and flowers. The cabin itself was made of wood and looked solid enough. There was even a thin tendril of smoke coming from the chimney, and there was an old woman sitting on the front step with a large mug in one hand and a book in the other. She looked up as Dimian approached. Grey hair framed her face, and wrinkles lined her skin in a way that made it look like she was smiling, even though she wasn't. But when she did smile, it was so bright that Dimian couldn't help but take a step forward. "You look wet and cold and hungry, boyo," the old woman said. "Come on inside." And Dimian hesitated. She seemed harmless enough, but he had heard all the stories about crazy old people living in the woods. Maybe not these woods, but he had been raised on blood-curdling fairy tales like everyone else. And everyone knew it was not smart to go into a cabin in the woods without backup. But Dimian was cold and wet and hungry, so he pushed those thoughts away and went inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut and 1,000 padlocks clicked and locked and trapped him. The old woman suddenly didn't look so old. She certainly didn't look frail. She stood in the middle of the room, her hands in her pockets, and that smile on her face. She nodded to the door. "The keys to those locks are in this room," she said. "When you find them, you will be free." Dimian looked around him. The cabin was lined floor to ceiling on every wall with books. Hundreds of books, thousands of books, tens of thousands of books. The old woman put the kettle on and made a pot of hot coffee. "You won't starve," she said, "or experience any discomfort that you don't choose. You just don't get to leave until you find the keys." Well, as you can imagine, Dimian was furious. He lunged at the woman, but she dipped out of his reach no matter what he did. Finally, he tore open every book, searching for keys, but there were none. He ripped off the covers, he cracked open the spines, but he couldn't find a single key. All the while, the old woman sat on a chair at the kitchen table, a mug in one hand and a book in the other. Days passed, and Dimian got angrier and angrier. He shouted and threw things, stamped and broke things. He swore and screamed until he thought his heart and lungs would crack. Dimian fought and battled the old woman for a whole year. During that time, he searched every inch of the house. He ripped open the walls and lifted the floorboards, but there were no keys. He cursed and yelled with such fury that he thought his soul would be lost to him forever. Finally, as the sun rose at the start of another year, he begged the old woman to release him or let him die. All the woman said was, "The keys are here. When you find them, you will be free." In exhaustion, Dimian picked up one of the books he had torn and he put the cover back on. It was Lord of the Rings by Tolkien. The old woman wasn't going to let him go, so Dimian decided to join her in her game and see if that would give him a way out. So he sat at the kitchen table opposite the old woman, mug in one hand, a book in the other, and he read. He ignored the woman, and the woman ignored him. There was silence in the cabin for a long, long time. But as Dimian read, something in his heart clicked. By the end of that book, Dimian had learned about friendship, about courage and determination, about good versus evil. Without thinking, he picked up Cuckoo's Nest, and he learned about deceit and survival. Then To Kill a Mockingbird, where he learned about justice and understanding. Then Good Omen, where he learned about humor. Soon, Dimian was the one filling the coffee pot. Every book had a story. Every story had an idea. Every idea seemed to mean something. Every meaning was a lesson, and every lesson unlocked a part of Dimian's heart and mind that he didn't even know existed. 1,000 books later, and without even realizing what had happened, Damien found himself sitting on the front steps of that cabin, coffee mug in one hand, a good book in the other, sun on his face, and the old woman at his side. "Am I free?" he asked. The old woman smiled. "You've always been free, Damien. You just had to see it." Well, there you go. That's it for today from Waffle-Free Storytelling. It's so good that you joined me. So as always, you know the waffle is down in the show notes, or go to www.tinakonstant.com where you can get everything else, including the Waffle-Free Storytelling channel for kids. Oh my goodness, what a year we're having. So do something purely spectacular with the day, even if it's just sitting quietly and watching the sun go down. And when that's done, go and hug the people you love. All right, have a good one, and I will see you next time for something weird and random from the universe. Bye-bye now. Hey. Biscuits later, Jack.